Let's get going. So, welcome everybody for Wapiti Wednesday for January 15th. We'll see if any stragglers jump in, but we'll get going. So, tonight I want to do something different. I know, a few weeks back we had an episode and I kind of talked about doing some things a little bit different in 2025. So, what I wanted to do was basically kind of start going into other aspects of elk that we really haven't talked about. And so, I thought tonight we would start with elk biology and talk about body temperature. So, let me ask you guys real quick. Either of you know what a elk's body temperature is?
No, I'll take a
No,
guess at I'll take a guess at 102.
102. Okay. Lyle, you want to take a stab?
typically larger animals have a lower body temperature, so less than ours.
Less than ours. Okay. So ours is 98.7, right? So, okay. Um, why do you guys think that's kind of important for us to kind of understand their body temperature?
For wallows and how they act and how they're in the shade,
Okay.
bedding
Okay.
most of the day, not up and around 'cause it's too hot for them.
Okay. Okay. It's a good answer. So, all right, let's do this. And we want to share that. So once again, we have a handy dandy sheet. I know kind of did the same thing back when we did the,
I nailed it.
what's that?
I said, oh,
Oh, you said 102. Actually, it's 101.3 to 102.2.
oh my God, yeah, wow, okay.
So, and I was wanting you to quote it in Celsius, not Fahrenheit, so you were way off. Yeah. Jim, if you think I'm going to give you any kudos for that,
Yeah,
not at all. Actually, as soon as you said 102, I was like, holy crap, he just stole that thunder. So, okay. So basically, kind of what we're going to cover in this is elk body temperature regulation and thermal regulation challenges that they have. So, Jim, you were right in there. Normal elk body temperature raises from 101 or ranges from 101.3 to 102.2. And, basically, like all mammals, elk are endothermic, warm blooded, and, must maintain constant internal temperature. So, Lyle, you were partially right because of their large body size. It does actually help them maintain and stable their core temperature a lot more. But because of that larger body size, it does present some pretty good challenges. And this was pretty interesting while doing this research, and this has been kind of fun, thinking about some of these topics and doing these research because it really gets into some interesting rabbit holes and avenues. So now, mechanisms for maintaining body temperature. We're going to start in the cold weather, and basically, we've all seen it. The elk hair changes throughout the season. I mean, if you think of photos of elk in the springtime and they just have that nasty, nasty coat because they're in that transition from that thicker winter coat that they grow for the colder temperatures. So either of you guys ever been around horses?
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, same thing. Notice how the horses get that longer hair during the winter. They start in the fall and that hair gets longer, 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 and then during the winter and then during in the spring, they're rubbing on fence posts and everything just to get rid of that. Elk are exactly the same way. They're both mammals. Now, elk also have a pretty dense undercoat underneath that long hair. So it is a two coat system almost. So they also have specialized blood vessel systems within the legs, which counter current heat exchange. And that's something I never knew. I mean, that was kind of interesting learning on this that elk have a specialized blood vessel system within their legs, and I meant to go back and try to dive into that deeper to kind of find out, okay, what are these specialized blood vessels? So for those of you that are in live tonight, for those of you that are watching the replays, if you ever have a moment where you're bored and you just want to go learn some interesting information, go into ChatGPT or Claude AI or even just Google and just Google, you know, elk's specialized blood vessel system within the legs. How does it operate? How does it work? What does it do and why? So I dropped the ball. I meant to expand on that one a little bit. So they also have behavioral adaptations like seeking shelter and clustering together that we will dive into some more of the behavioral adaptations on down a little bit. And then, of course, fat reserves both serve as insulation and body sources when food source. And that's one of the things that really bulls have a hard time with this because, they expend so much energy during the rut and they burn so much of their fat reserve that that's why a lot of times the bigger bulls that really go hard during the rut, that's why a lot of times when a certain point of the rut comes, that's why those big bulls will separate from the herd and go into isolation. And that's why some of you have heard me talk about, rifle hunting. You guys ready to sing happy birthday?
Oh, there he is. I don't know if we're singing, but
So, but you guys have heard me talk in the past about how those bulls will separate from the herd towards the tail end of the rut and just dive into these deep, dark, nasty holes. And basically what they're doing is they're not moving a whole lot because their main focus at that time is build those fat reserves up so that they can combat that cold weather and have a much better chance to survive the winter. So Greg, just because it was your birthday a couple of days ago does not give you permission to show up late to this. We're talking about biology, but anyways, welcome and happy birthday, buddy.
I'm his twin.
You what?
I'm his younger twin.
Oh, okay, okay.
I had a grandson hockey game. Just got home from it.
Oh,
Yeah.
we were kind of wondering where you're at. We were all teed up to sing you happy birthday, but that moment's gone, so you're not going to be subject to awful singing.
I dodged that bullet, huh?
Actually, I don't know if that would be at your expense or at our expense. We'll save that one for a debate for another day. So,
Well, thanks for the happy birthday thing anyway. So
you're welcome. We're just kind of getting started into the biology of heat regulation. Oh, I will circle back up on this, Greg. So, mechanisms for maintaining body temperature in cold weather. This is something I learned that I never knew. Elk have actually specialized blood vessel systems within their legs to counter current heat exchange. And like I told the guys, I meant to dive deeper in that to find out more about that system. So I know you're retired and have a lot of time on your hands. So could you please dive into that and let everybody know what you found out?
yeah, sure will.
Perfect. Okay. So
Yeah.
Lyle, Jim, you guys don't have to research it now. Greg was gracious enough to volunteer for all of us.
yeah, no kidding.
I won't.
Thanks,
I
guys.
won't be here for the next month.
Okay. All right. Summer temperature regulation challenges. Now, imagine that. Elk, being mammals, warm-blooded, are better adapted to cold weather than hot weather. They're better adapted to cold than heat. I'm sure we all could kind of figure that one out. So, their summer coat is actually quite a bit thinner, but it still can retain heat. And they have a limited ability to sweat compared to some other animals or other mammals. That's why basically, coming back to their behavioral adaptations are important. And this is one thing that I wanted to dive into was the behavioral cooling methods because a lot of times with our archery seasons, they're getting going middle of August or end of August when we do have some pretty warm days. And I think it's important to understand these behavioral methods, because if you understand these behavioral methods to keep cool, it's going to help you find elk early in that season. Now, I've talked about it before in early season to hit cool dark draws, cool dark areas, darker areas, creeks, those kind of things. But this behavioral methods is really going to basically shed a little bit more light on it. So first thing, strategic timing of activity. Here's your big word for the day. They shift to crepuscular, which is dawn to dusk, and nocturnal activity patterns during hot weather. Makes sense because so the other thing about the elk's temperature, um, you know, body temperature 101 to 102, they have to stay within that temperature. Because think about with us, 98.6. What happens in humans if we get a temp of 102, 103, 104? It becomes dangerous. So, and side effects of staying prolonged in that heat and can have adverse effects on us. Same thing with elk. And down below, we'll kind of dive into some of that stuff. So um, that's why, during hot weather, they will reduce their movement and feeding during peak heat hours, which typically is from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So think about your early season elk movements. It's within the first couple hours of sunup, and they don't move until the last couple of hours before sundown. That's that's why. Now, understanding, so this is where, because of this reduced movement during the heat, and they're going to head to those cooler areas quicker. That's where doing some really good studying of your area, finding those cooler pockets, where those elk are going to head to. Now, remember too, we've talked about this in the past, that if you know where the elk are heading to and you get there before them, you are going to have an elk in a controlled area that they're not so much going to be on the move, and you're going to have a larger window to work those elk, especially if they're going into a cooler draw. You're going to have a much larger time frame to work them because it's not going to get as hot in there. They're going to be able to move. They're going to be able to react to your calls. So, make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
What temperatures are we talking about? 80 degrees, 80 to 90, or are we talking
Um,
60 to 70s?
From my experience, once you kind of start getting, temperatures where peak temp is, you know, 83 and up, I see them heading to bed a lot sooner. If you're in your 70s, they stay out a little bit longer. They don't go to bed. If you're in your 60s, man, they're out even longer.
Yeah.
So that's why, you get later in the season and you get into those 60-degree days, and it's like, holy crap, we had a rut fest until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, um, so they also maximize foraging in cooler morning hours when plants have a higher moisture content. So because a lot of times, because they're limiting that amount of movement, it might be a pretty good distance between food and water. But if they can find a food source that has dew on the grass or on the leaves or on the forages that they're eating, they can get their source of water that way too. So it does help. They are still going to typically go and bed down near a water source that they don't have to move. but in this case, sometimes they'll focus more on foraging on that higher moisture content plants, knowing that they don't have to hit water necessarily, as it's not as important before they go to bed, because they know they can go to bed with moisture from those plants, and they can get water when they get up during the middle of the day in that cool dark draw. And then of course they return to bedding areas before temperatures peak. So all right, habitat selection for temperature control. We know we've talked about this, to where they seek north and northeastern facing slopes. We've all been there, because those forest canopies on those north and northeastern facing slopes can be 5, 10, 15 degrees cooler than what they can on the southern sides. So, we've covered this one quite a bit, especially in some of the e-scouting modules that we've done, where we talk about finding those dark timber pockets. So the other things they'll do is choose higher elevations where temperatures are naturally cooler. So here's the thing too. So when we talk about those early season cool dark draws, what's the first thing that everybody thinks about? Lower elevations, right? Because you think about draws, you think about creek bottoms, and you think about cooler elevations. But what if there was a bench about 3/4 of the way up the mountainside on the northern side that has a spring, seep, or pond that starts a creek or tributary that's located in dark timber?
They'll take it.
Eureka.
That would be
Yeah,
that would be a kind of place during the early season that I would run to. I would find a route that I could hike into there in the dark, knowing that there is a high probability that elk are going to seek that type of area out, knowing that it's going to be dark timber, already 5 to 15 degrees cooler, but now you throw a water feature into it in a dark timbered area. That creek is going to drop the temperature down. You could potentially have a 15 to 20 degree temperature change on that side of the mountain. So I know last year the very first morning, Bryce and Liz and I went up, and we ended up, I don't know if you guys remember that big huge wallow that I posted a picture of. We hung out in that dark timber, and that's exactly what that was. That was almost to the top of the mountain. That was a bench that had a little creek through it with dark timber and that massive wallow. And we hung out in there. In fact, at one point, I got tired of laying in the hammock, and I got up and started walking around, and I walked out of that timber into the sunshine, and I took about 4 steps and went, nope, turned around and went right back into that shade. It was so nice and cool in there. So last item, prefer areas near ridgeline where breezes are more common. So the breeze also acts as a cooling mechanism. So again, you find that bench, that dark timber, that little creek in it, high up on the mountain. It doesn't necessarily have to be all the way up top, but if it's close enough to the top, those ridgeline breezes will roll over the top and come right down through that area and follow that new spring creek right down. And that's almost like putting a great big box fan next to your bed, or a fan next to your bed to blow air on. That's basically what you're getting in this topography feature. Mr. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? Sorry I was late today.
Oh, that's okay. Greg was late too because it's his birthday. So.
Hey, hush. Sorry.
So I just figured you didn't want to show up because it was about elk biology and that kind of stuff, which is kind of boring, and you have cooler
No,
things.
elk biology is important.
It is. So you're going to have to go back and watch the start of this, because there was something that I talked about at the first that I never knew about. So I'm challenging each of you guys to research a little bit on that. So
Okay, I'll look at it. Thanks.
We'll close this out. We'll come back to that. So, all right. How about that? Next item we're going to talk about is water-regulated cooling behaviors. Nice little segue about the wallows and the little creek and springs. So they increase the frequency of water source visits during hotter periods because one, not only they need more water intake in drinking, but also two, you have that cool breeze that's usually following creeks, and it there's not as many bugs in those areas either. They'll wade into streams or ponds or wallows to cool their body directly. We've all seen videos down in Arizona, New Mexico of elk just flooding into ponds. They're running into those ponds and lakes up to their bellies, and some of them will actually submerge their whole body. And you just kind of see their necks heading, sticking out. It's just all these ways to regulate that temp. So this is one that we talked about earlier. They'll often select bedding sites within a quarter mile of water sources. Because if you guys remember earlier where we talked about, they will limit the amount of travel that they do during the peak heat of the day. So if they're within a quarter mile of a water source, they don't have to move that far, especially if that water source is on the north side of the mountain. They have that dark timber that they can easily go to those water sources. So, they may actually stand for extended periods during the peak of the rut. They may also get into a wallow and just lay down in it and just stay there. I've had trail cameras on wallows that when I switch it to, video mode, they come in there in August and they just lay down in that wallow. And I've got some video that with the timestamps, that bull was probably laying in that wallow for hour and a half, just laying in there in that mud. So they'll also use wet areas like springs and seeps where evaporative cooling can occur. Again, that is kind of what we talked about. If you're out scouting during the summer and you find an area that has, kind of tall grass that kind of has this marshy type wetland look to it, there is a good chance that area could turn into a wallow because they'll get in there and paw on that grass and create a wallow or a pool of water that they can just lay down in. So, okay. Physical positioning and posture. So bed on bare ground or rocks that conduct heat away from their body. Position themselves to maximize exposure to cooling breezes. So basically what that means is if you have, again, I'm going to go to back to that bench with the start of the creek where the creek's flowing down and you have that wind, they're going to position themselves to maximize exposure to those cooling breezing, which means basically they're going to turn so they're facing away from that breeze, so that breeze is really coming over their back. It's hitting their whole body more, because if they're facing to it, the way their body is shaped, there's a chance that wind could hit it and split that wind. Think of, have you guys ever seen wind studies on aerodynamics of a vehicle? And how that wind current, it doesn't hit the hood and then go. Before the hood, it actually curls up and then up the windshield. So it's not actually touching that surface. So if they're facing into the wind, that wind could split and actually go around their body, which is the largest part. That's what they want to cool. By them laying facing with the wind, now that wind actually has the ability to go over their whole body and cool them down. Now, the other thing that they may stand in shaded areas rather than bedding to increase air, because now their body is not laying on the ground, drawing heat from the ground. They're actually standing up and letting that full air circle all the way around their body. So we kind of already talked about grooming and physical adaptations, where we talked about where they increase grooming to remove the winter coats as temperature warm up. We kind of talked about the horses rubbing on fence posts and that kind of stuff. Elk do the same thing. They will rub on trees and rocks and all kinds of stuff to help get that winter coat off, especially as the temperature kind of starts rising a little bit. So we've kind of touched on wallows. So this is interesting too. They actually use saliva or evaporation for cooling through increased licking. So imagine a cat sitting there licking their fur to clean themselves. Now imagine an elk during the summertime licking themselves to basically wet their fur, and then that cooling evaporation from that saliva comboed with the breeze and the moisture in the air, all that together is just going to help them cool down. I've never seen an elk lick, so I'm kind of curious. I kind of want to throw some trail cameras in kind of some known bedding areas and put it on video mode because I want to see that. I want to see. I don't know why. Okay, last one. It just kind of ties into the wallows, which we all know about. Now, this was kind of interesting. Some of the social behavior changes. Herds typically spread out more during hot weather, meaning when they go into their bedding area, they're not right on top of each other. They'll have more spacing against each other because of their temperatures. They're putting off that body heat. We've heard it in survival situations that sharing body heat with another individual can help you avoid hypothermia and survive a cold night. Well, it makes sense in hot weather where, I mean, we've been there during the summertime when the middle of the night and wife kind of rolls over onto our side of the bed and we kind of got to give that time out and too hot, get back on your side of the bed, and you got to build that pillow fort down the middle so they stay on their side of the divide and you can sleep comfortably. We're all smirking and laughing because we've all been there.
Gotcha.
So there's also less competitive behavior to reduce heat generating activity. So basically, what that's talking about there is as bulls are in the bachelor group, sometimes during the summertime, if it's cooler temperature, they can, obviously they're not going to spar because their antlers are in velvet. They're very soft, but you will see bulls stand up on their hind legs and kind of spar at each other with their front hooves. During the hot part of the day, they're not going to do that behavior because that actually is expending energy, which actually does raise their temperatures. So, and they'll share prime cooling locations with herd members. So again, that bedding area that we talked about, that bench. So, and then they coordinate movement to and from water sources, meaning they all kind of go at the same time. So, all right. Any questions so far? Nope. Okay. So let's talk about signs of heat stress. So increased respiratory rate, panting. Have seen quite a few videos on elk during the summertime that they're sitting there, they're panting, they're open mouth breathing. They're basically trying to get more heat out of their body when they're basically doing that. Seeking shade during peak heat hours, kind of talked about that up top, reduced. Congregating. So the other thing of heat stress is a depressed appetite. So, okay, dangers of hypothermia or dangers of overheating. Now, this is interesting. Is risk of hypothermia, which is actually pretty dangerous with the elevation of body temperature with an elk. When we hear hypothermia, we think more of cold temperatures. We don't think of it in the heat. It comes into the play that, at least for us, if we're sweating profusely and then there's a huge temperature swing, then basically, overheating, we're exerting. Hiking up the mountain during the hot part of the day, during the heat, we're just sweating, we're overheating, and then all of a sudden we get into a real cool area, and especially if there's a breeze blowing and that hits us on that sweat, feels really good at first, but after a prolonged time, we start shivering because we're starting this, and shivering is actually the first stage of going into hypothermia. It's your body trying to rewarm itself. So dehydration leading to decreased blood volume, reduced fertility and reproductive success. So again, that's why you don't see a huge amount of rut activity at the start of the season, not during the day. That's why, I've talked about this in the past too, that there is a chance for cows to come in estrus early in the season, but most of the rut activity that you see, if that does going to happen, is during the nighttime, during that cooler part, when that is going to happen. So also too, there's an increased susceptibility to disease. And in extreme cases, if they stay too hot for too long, it's not just organ failure, but they can also have brain damage as well, which can lead to death. So, okay, critical environmental factors, direct sunlight exposure, ambient temperatures, humidity levels. So, high humidity can actually make cooling more difficult on elk. So for those of you that are hunting elk in high humidity areas, got to kind of consider that. So I know Jim doesn't have much humidity down where he's at all.
Well, there's more when I go where I go up in the mountains.
Yeah, because I thought you talked about some of those areas. You get some pretty good humidity up there sometimes,
Yeah, we do. Because it can rain up there.
which does lead to some incredible thunderstorms, though.
Oh man. Yep. Oh, oh, yeah.
Okay. Other environmental factors, available shade and water sources, and time of day, and seasonal considerations. So, what the seasonal considerations mean is as your season progresses and temperature starts changing, they don't need that heavy shade, heavy thick timber as much. They're still gonna bed down. They're still gonna move in there because we still do get some decent temperatures towards the tail end of the season. But for those of you guys that are watching that are rifle hunters and you start getting into those colder temperatures, there actually are times where you get later into the season and you're gonna find elk more on those southern facing slopes, because at that point they are seeking the sunshine and the warmth. Because the opposite can happen too, because if they get into the shade, they get into the colder temperatures, it takes a lot of energy to warm to keep their body warm, especially if they haven't fully grown out that winter coat yet. So understanding these behaviors, and as those seasons change and as the weather changes, their patterns and what they actually seek out are going to change just a little bit too. So by you understanding this, you can kind of go, okay, my priorities the elk's priorities at the start of the season are this, this, and this. So within my hunt area, I want to focus within the areas that provide those things. And that's just going to help you, find elk early. And then as the season changes, as the temperature starts going down, okay, those items aren't going to be as critical. Now what areas are you going to go into? And you can almost take your area and you can break it down to, I'm focusing here during the first part of the season, I'm focusing here during the middle part of the season, and I'm focusing here during the later part of the season. But also too, keep in mind that if your weather changes at all during that for a period of time, your plan's going to adjust. Okay? All right. So we kind of talked about the behavioral adaptations up above. So management implications. So this is talking about within the elk habitat. So it's extremely important in maintaining thermal cover in elk habitat. So, I know here in Idaho we had some pretty good fires last year. So, those areas, elk love old burns, especially recent old burns, because of the new growth that happens in those. The new growth, the new grasses have so much. I mean, they're just packed with minerals and vitamins and everything else in there. But the drawback to those burns are you don't have that thermal cover, you don't have that sunblock, you don't have that shade. So that's why you're more likely to see elk hanging out in burns during the middle of the day later in the season, maybe into some later rifle seasons, than you are the first part of archery season. So again, understanding what they need, how they what they need to survive, and they're basically, no, I'm drawing a blank on what I was going to say. Anyways, it was a really good thought. So, so
Well,
um,
it sounded like a good thought.
did you see the smoke coming out of the ears? Because I mean that thing was just churning. So, but no, understanding what they need at different times, then basically you. Well, hey, it's the start of the season. We're gonna have a high of 90 degrees today. Well, you're not gonna go hunt in the middle of an old burn for midday madness. Just the likelihood of finding elk in that are extremely slim. But if it's later during the season, there's good feed in that burn. It's in close proximity of a bedding area. Okay, middle of the day hunting that edge to catch them from sneaking from that bedding area out into that burn to eat. That's a whole different story during the middle of the day. Um, you know, they need accessible water sources. Now the thing is it doesn't always have to be a creek. I remember several years back when hunted the place that I did forever here in Idaho. There was one place that I stumbled upon, and there was a pond in there that was probably 15 yards wide by 20-25 yards long. The dirt underneath those trees was probably 8 to 10 inches of just moon dust, just churned up soft powder. And as soon as you walked into that pocket, it just reeked like elk. Now, this is before wolves were reintroduced and they would go to the same places day after day after day. But this was an area that these elk would go in there and bed because it was in a dark timber pocket on the backside of a ridge in a basin that was shaded all afternoon. So it had everything right there. It had the dark timber, it had the shade, it had the water sources. They didn't have to go very far at all. And they could actually go probably 250 yards and they were in some good feed. So just this one little pocket. And I mean, I probably hunted back in there for probably 5-6 years before I stumbled across this. And man, once I found it, it was one of my go-to places. Okay. The other thing, considering heat stress when planning human activities. So you guys have heard me talk about when I'm running my trail cameras and when it comes time to swap out the card, that I do that hike first thing in the morning, and I don't sit there and spend time at that camera to look at the pictures. I just swap the cards out and get the heck out of there because I don't want to put added stress on them. I don't want to bump them or push them or anything, and I stay out of bedding areas. Most of my cameras are placed either on travel corridors or water sources so that I can get an idea of which way they're traveling from feed to bed or bed to feed. I already know where they're bedding. I want to know their travel routes. So also too, because I don't want to go into those bedding areas and I don't want to bump them. So
That's the topic.
Okay. So, importance of understanding elk thermal regulation for wildlife management. These are conclusions, takeaways. Balance between winter survival and summer heat stress. So, winter survival, it's getting enough food to make it through. Heat stress, how they have to regulate and make their changes to be able to survive every day. The role that habitat diversity and temperature regulation, all the different things based on the different temperatures and how they change. Colder temperatures are going to seek more sunshine. They're going to be out in the open more because they want to soak in that heat from the sun. And then human impacts. Heat weather, hot weather, if we're out there and we're continually bumping them and moving them. I know I've been out there during the first part of elk season, and you can see where elk were bumped and they've been running, and man, the tongues are just hanging out the side of their mouth. They're just panting heavy because basically they probably got bumped. They started running and then could have bumped into somebody else and somebody else and somebody else, and it just kept going and going, and that's really, really dangerous for them. So, okay. So let's come back up here to the top. So Mr. Larry, here it is. Did you know a mechanism that elk use to maintain body temperature during cold weather is that they have specialized blood vessel system within their legs?
No.
I didn't either. I learned that. And I meant to dive into that more, but I forgot to. So there's the thing you could look up, you could research. So
Okay.
Almost like getting
Okay, great.
hot water recirculation to your far end of the house. It sounds like.
kind of.
Yeah.
So
You get
yeah,
hot water quick.
it'll be interesting to see how those specialized blood vessels work. So that is basically kind of it. If you guys want, when I upload the video and shoot the email out to let everybody know that this video is uploaded, I can email that form out again if anybody wants it.
Yes. Please.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank
Okay. So thoughts? What do you guys think about that information? Anybody learn anything, or anybody go, "Oh, that's interesting"?
I learned they have new vessels
you.
in
This is
their legs.
good program, good insights.
Jim, you learned that they had specialized blood vessels within their legs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, he put a lot of information in there. It was good.
it was a
Like
lot of
lot
fun
more work.
doing the research on it, and it actually I had no idea when I started diving down this rabbit hole how much information I was going to come up with, and I didn't realize until now that there was a couple of redundancies where the same information was above but repeated down below. I guess I should have double checked that when I was researching, but hey, that's okay. So does that kind of make you guys think a little bit about approaching things a little bit different within your archery season?
It explains a few things, but it
Yeah, it
also
does.
refortifies things that you've already taught us. North facing slopes, north and east facing slopes for bedding areas because they want the coolness. But it makes sense that they can adapt to cold weather better than they can hot
Yeah.
weather.
Yeah.
That's a lot of sense. Well, the hides,
And one of the
are thick. I mean,
well, think about how long, especially up on the neck. I mean, you start getting up in the neck and the head, and that cape just starts getting longer and longer. But also too, the I don't know if you guys ever pay attention, but when I'm breaking down an elk, I'm still constantly to this day, looking at their hair, how long it is, and all that kind of stuff, because I also know that hair can taint the meat, but also too, man, how fast that hair can dull a knife.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that a hair
yeah.
can dull. But if you look at how thick that hair is, it's quite a bit thicker than a human hair.
Yeah, it's thick. It's not like a rabbit hair, that's for sure.
Lyle, what do you think?
Well, it makes sense of where you see elk during different times of the season, like what you're saying. You see elk here early season, and you see elk on those open south-facing slopes in the October, early November hunts where they're out. Maybe it's in the snow. They're out trying to get warm versus trying to get cold. Where they're going to be for each activity that they're trying to do.
Now here's a question for you guys. We've all seen that. We've all experienced it. But how many of us have ever sat there and wondered why? Or had the thought to dive in and research to learn why they do that or different things like that?
Yeah, I guess I just never really thought that deep into it, but it makes a lot of sense.
Because we've all been taught and we've all heard it that, well, when you go out hunting, elk are where you find them. We've all heard that, right? But now imagine, now because of what we talked about tonight, now you start thinking more about it. Okay, where am I most likely to find elk because the weather is going to be this? Or where am I more likely to find elk because weather is going to do that? I mean, I know we've talked about it in the past that on windy days, we've talked about where to go look for elk when the wind's blowing, because how that wind can affect their ability to hear. It affects their ability to see because the grass is moving and they can't lock in on movement as easy, and so they're going to seek those places that are out of the wind so that they could use their survival tools to survive. But I know we've talked about that a couple of times, but man, we've never kind of talked about, heat or, colder days or that kind of stuff. So yeah, this was a fun one to dive into. Again, just more of kind of where I want to take live Q&A sessions, this year, more into stuff like this. And so,
Michael, one of the things that you mentioned was working in a burn area in the middle of the day, and I'd walked through some dark timber, came through a big burn area, and the rocks that we were walking on were the size of cantaloupes, and it was just terrible. So we were moving along there a little too fast, and all of a sudden we come up on an oasis in the middle of that and bumped a big 7x7 bull that was just cooling there in the middle of a burn area with an oasis inside of it.
dark timber, any water source in there?
Yeah, there was a little water in there with him.
So he had a little spring seep within that dark timber right in the middle of the burn.
Yep.
He could hang out
Yep.
there.
Perfect place for him.
He had views all the way around, could see anything coming after him. So you guys probably caught
Yep.
him where he felt so comfortable that he actually had his head and rack down on the ground, just probably completely zonked out and sleeping because he felt entirely safe. It's just like one of the places that we used to hunt. We had a bull in there that we were trying to figure out how to get this dude, because he would drop his cows on the edge of the timber, and then he would walk across this barren open hillside and lay down in one very small pocket of trees. And the reason he did that is because we know about the diurnal winds. So as the heat rises, the winds start going up. So he would lay in this little patch of timber and he would be able to scent check every cow that was laying in the tree line below him. But he had full 360 degrees that if anything was trying to come in on him, he would just slip out the backside and they would never even know. It was so frustrating because we would watch him drop his cows and then head to that. And of course we were like, oh, well, we can come from this backside. And in the first suggestion was come from the backside, get in that little pocket of timber and just wait for him to come up. Great theory, but the only problem is he's coming up
Mhm.
that face in the morning with thermals blowing
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
So it just, and then it was like, okay, well, we'll just, we'll position ourselves near the cows so that when he comes, when it comes evening time and it's time to head to feed, he'll come down, round up his cows. But he had his cows trained that the cows would leave the timber, go to him, and then they would walk out through the opening up over the top of the ridge to feed up top. So then we were like, okay, well, we'll just get up top to where they're heading out to feed. The only problem is they hit the top of the ridge about the time that it was dark. So you wouldn't have a shot opportunity on the backside of the ridge. But they did a circle that they would go up to the top and then they would loop back around onto the face where we were and then drop down into the creek, get water, and then head up that face with thermals blowing down to the creek. They had a pretty good system, and there's a reason that that dude was as big as he was.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. I am working on a guest. I don't know if it's going to be the next episode, but it's going to be James Nash from the Six Ranch over in Enterprise. So, James is a former Marine tank commander. His family has owned the Six Ranch over there in the Enterprise, Oregon area. They are a cattle ranch, but they also guide hunts. James is extremely knowledgeable on a lot of things. He is one of those that if he gets a thought on something, he wants to know why. He wants to know everything about that subject. But as a guide, I think it would be another perspective on the approach to elk hunting. And James is one of those. He also has the Six Ranch podcast. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about that. If you haven't, go check out the Six Ranch podcast. Some great episodes, some great information. He has the typical, he does quite a bit on Instagram, but it's kind of cool when he's out there guiding because he'll post some little videos and you can tell by his videos on his approach. James is not necessarily one that goes in with the mindset of this is how this encounter is going to go. We all get stuck into the habit of we want to control the situation. We have a narrative and we're just going to do what we want instead of adapting to the information with what we're getting. I mean, some of you guys have been part of Elk Calling Academy long enough that you've heard me talk about, adaptation and gather that information, take that bull's temperature, see where he's at, and then give him what he's looking for, and that's going to increase your chances. James kind of takes that same approach. So, but really excited that he accepted and said that he would love to come on and talk with us. So, so I will get a hold of him. I don't know if it's going to be the next one, but hopefully it'll be an episode coming up here fairly soon.
Yeah, he's got a lot of podcasts on YouTube.
He does.
Yes, a lot.
He's got a lot of information. Yeah, on because I think he actually he's kind of changed the way he does his podcast. He used to call and record over the phone, but now he has people drive or he meets them somewhere and actually sits down with them with camera rolling and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
So I know I've had the privilege to be on a few of his episodes, and it's always a fun time. So I'm looking forward to flipping the script on him, and now I can put him in the hot seat and ask the questions and make him think quickly and respond to them. So.
Give him the circulation question.
The circulation question. So, okay, Greg, you are tasked with writing that question down, and we get James, and I say, does anybody have any questions? You can hit him with that one.
Okay.
How's your elbow?
Good. I was able to, I have the brace on, but I was able to touch my ear for the first time in quite a while. So
Good. When do you think you need that AccuBow to start rehabilitating?
I'm in this brace for another 3 weeks,
Okay.
and then they start uh, doing the heavier physical therapy. So anytime after February, March, somewhere in there.
Okay, I've got it sitting over on the side here. I do have the second band with it, so you just let me know when you're ready, and we'll meet up, and you use that for as long as you need to rehabilitate.
Will do.
So,
Will do. Thank you.
okay, so with kind of these last couple episodes where we've dove into information like this, what are some topics that you guys would like me to dive into and do this same kind of format with?
Mm.
Mhm.
If you want, think about it and then just shoot me an email. So that way you guys can think about and come up with some topics and ideas, and don't be afraid to challenge me. It's just going to help us all be better. So,
It was very evident you put more, or again, you put a lot of work into this this evening.
trying to just trying to
It was evident.
trying to trying to raise the bar with the whole new series. Oh, speaking of series, how many of you received the email with the February challenge?
Oh, yeah, I got that.
I didn't.
Are
Very,
you sure?
I haven't seen anything.
It came out last week.
yeah, last week, at least.
I'll check my junk mail, my spam box. Maybe it went there.
Okay. So, Lyle, have you been getting those?
I don't think I got that one, but
Okay. Yeah, it should have just came out last week, I think it was. So February is a calling challenge, and it's broken down into some different categories and things to focus on. So, check your sometimes, because since I only send them out once a month, it could be that your system flags it as spam. So if you do find it in the spam folder, just mark that email address as safe, and then from that point on, it should just come into your inbox.
Hmm. Okay, good.
So now, Jim, since you're the only one that admitted that you received it, have you started your February
Yes,
call?
I started, I did some calling. I had to get some new reads. I was waiting for Christmas. My wife got them. And that's a question I want to ask you about because I got a gift card from Bass Pro Shop.
Okay.
And you have to pay shipping and everything on that. But the only one they have is the ribbon
Yes.
read. Which one is the better one to get of the ribbon? I have a big palette too, so
How,
the
you said you
strap,
do. You said you do have a wide palette.
yeah,
Good.
yeah, big read, yeah.
How are you on conventional reads, turkey reads?
I never used a turkey read before in my life.
Okay. My two favorite in the Ribbon series are the Black Ice
Okay, I got
and the
that.
Stratum.
They have them both. Okay,
Okay.
that's it.
So
Have them both. All right.
the difference on these is you may not like them at first. The Stratum is a very light reactive read, but you can see how it has this black part on here, which actually does give backing when you get into the bugles. So, but the thing I like about it, or
Wow,
you have a lot of control on that thing.
and that's the stratum.
That's the Black Ice.
Oh, it's black ice. Okay.
The Stratum is heavier latex, but the thing I like about it has those deeper, kind of older cow, more mature tones to it. So, both work really well for bugling. And in fact, I used to really like reeds like that are light and reactive. And then for some reason, I went away from that and started going to heavier latex reeds that took more pressure. When I first got these to try them, I hated them. But I had to reteach myself on how to use a reactive reed. One thing that you may do if you find that you're on, do you normally use the middle part of your tongue or more of the
Yeah,
tip?
yeah, I do. And my favorite go-to reed is the gray amp. So,
So the stratum's going to be comparable to the gray amp.
okay. All right.
The black ice is going to be lighter than that.
Okay.
So if you find that you're using the middle part of your tongue and you're having a hard time with the black ice, pull your tongue back a little bit and get more out towards the tip, because you're not as hard out on the tip of your tongue as you are on the middle part. So pull your tongue back, use that front part of your tongue on the black ice, and you'll find that the controls on that. And the one thing I do is I'll use the front part of my tongue when I'm doing cow sounds on the black ice, but when I go to bugle, I'll start with that front part, and as I start to put pressure up, I'll actually slide my tongue forward into that heavier part and increase that air to get the black ice drives really well on the higher notes with more air pressure than it does tongue pressure. So,
Gotcha.
but your control on it is just phenomenal. Now, I also know that he has a new set out that is in his Dome series, but it's on the wide frame. I haven't had a chance to play with him yet. He did some kind of pre-launch last year during September. I wasn't quick enough to grab some. So I'm waiting for those to become available so that I can grab those and play with those. I didn't like his domed reeds because they're a little narrower framed, and they just didn't work well for me. But on the wider frame, they have that black ice, they have the stratum, and he's got a third one, which is just a single light latex. Just a phenomenal cow call. Really light, really easy to control, really responsive. So, okay, guys. Last opportunities. Any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns?
Good job tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Glad
Good
you-
information. Thank you.
good tip.
Thanks a lot, Michael.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. As always, keep calling, keep practicing. More importantly, though, have fun. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks on the next Wapiti Wednesday live Q&A. Appreciate all of you guys tuning in tonight.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank-